Welcome to Boxing Scene Today. I'm Ricardo Celis here in the studio with the champ, Paulie Malignaggi, and we have via Zoom the trainer of the year, Robert Garcia. During his fight against Terence Crawford, Canelo Alvarez only connected 16 jabs in 12 rounds. 16 jabs in 12 rounds. Now he's getting surgery on his left elbow. Paulie, in the first 3 rounds, he only connected 2 jabs, and there's a huge rumor that Canelo Alvarez was injured before the fight.
Maybe it's a good conversation for to discuss a rematch. I don't know. Personally, I don't think Canelo really jabs much in his fights anyway. His jab is never really something that sticks out in his attack. He has a varied arsenal, and it's pretty creative at times. But his jab is not really one of his strong suits, especially against lefties. I mean, I didn't really notice a lot of jabs against Lara, against Austin Trout. Even against Saunders, honestly, he did well, but I wasn't really with big use of the jab. Really, I mean, if people want to make this a talking point for a rematch, hey, that to me that's pretty much the only way I think to do it, as far as making sure the belts aren't kept hostage. If Crawford is not going to campaign at 168, but there's a rematch, okay, he keeps the belts until the rematch. Otherwise, I would prefer the belts to be vacant so that the weight class can move, because I don't see Crawford staying at 168. But maybe this is a sort of a conversation starter for a rematch. I don't think it makes a difference personally. I think he's going to connect not on many jabs regardless, because again, it's a southpaw, and Canelo's jab is not really that active most of the time anyway.
Right. Robert, what do you think about Canelo, that he didn't use his left hand that much against Terence Crawford, and now he's having surgery?
Paulie, 100%. There's never been a fight where Canelo, we could say Canelo's jab is the best out there, and he connects it so many times. So active with that jab. I totally agree, especially when he's fighting a left-hander. It's. I don't think there's any excuses there. I think Crawford was much better, and we'll do the same in a rematch if it happens, even if he's healthy 100%. A lot of fighters, most of the time when they fight, there's a lot of injuries. There's a lot of problems during camp. There's fighters that fight with different injuries and stuff like that. At this point, I really believe what Paulie's saying. Maybe a rematch is coming, and they're using this to have an excuse to say that the rematch is going to be much better. I could see it that way, because there is a lot of money involved, and the rematch would be huge. But especially when now people are believing that, oh, he was injured, so he couldn't throw that jab. Canelo never throws that jab that much anyway. So I really believe that I'm with Paulie in this one.
Yeah, especially against left-handers as well. It's not really.
Exactly.
It's a lot of right-handers actually don't throw a lot of jabs against left-handers, but Canelo, who already doesn't really have an active jab to begin with, against left-handers is really not that active anyway. It's not. It wasn't something that you would notice in the fight because Canelo usually throws more jabs. It was not even noticeable in the fight because Canelo never really throws a lot of jabs anyway.
But don't you have to disclose your injuries to the commission on the pre-fight analysis?
That's why it's like a half an excuse too.
Right.
Remember Pacquiao did this after he lost to Mayweather. He got outclassed by Mayweather, and then it was shoulder or something. So when we've seen
that's why,
this before.
Paulie, there was a class action suit against Manny Pacquiao and against Top Rank because precisely Manny Pacquiao, he disclosed that he had an injury in his shoulder in the fight before Mayweather.
The thing about injuries to shoulders and elbows is there's always something you can get surgically operated on. Your shoulders and your elbows, there's always something a little bit wrong with them through the years of wear and tear. It's something that you can get surgery for. It's something that you can actually work through. And it's not there. Then there's, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be a doctor here. There's also extreme cases where you definitely need surgeries. But then there's like half cases. Like, for example, end of my career, I had some bone spurs in my elbow. I still could use it. You know what I mean? I could say I need surgery. I could get the surgery. But if I don't get it, it's not the end of the world. It's a bit of an injury, but it's not like it's 100% needed surgery. So those kind of joints, the shoulder, the elbow, especially for the lead hand, you have those kind of situations, especially through wear and tear in your career. And if you notice, Pacquiao and Canelo both later on in their career, they have these kind of I don't want to say excuses, but reasons, that they say they perform a certain way. It's not really a big difference maker because unless they're super difficult surgeries where the tear or the bones are completely broken. It's not a surgery you definitively need. You can choose to have a surgery to maybe make it better, but it's not something that's going to affect your fighting ability to the point where it makes a huge difference. If you can do the work to work through it. But listen, like myself and Coach Garcia saying, maybe you need to start putting a conversation starter for a rematch, and in order to make a selling point for a rematch, you can do this time Canelo's gonna have his left hand, and you know what happens when Canelo has his left hand, and the Triple Clown posse, the
Right.
Triple C posse, the Canelo Clown Brigade will start believing again, and that's fine. That's what you need to make big business. That's what you need to create the rematch conversation, and maybe possibly that's what they're trying to angle to. I think if Canelo needs a surgery and he gets it better, then that's, again, it's a conversation starter. I don't think it makes a difference personally. I don't think it's going to make a difference, but hey, if you're going to try to angle at a rematch,
Right.
the fight was so one-sided that ultimately you need to angle it in a certain way where you have a belief for a selling point. Not that today selling points don't matter. I mean, Gervonta Davis fights Uber drivers every pay-per-view, and it's still on pay-per-view. So you don't really need that today. They can just make a pay-per-view regardless. But I think when it comes to a Canelo pay-per-view, there's always something stellar about it, a lot of selling points. So I think you start the conversation now, and you start to water it a little bit. It grows. There's a root. It grows, and then by the time you get to the next pay-per-view, if you make that rematch, you have a selling point.
So what do you think, Robert? Do you think that's a selling point for to do the rematch? Canelo now being 100% against Terence Crawford?
I think it is. I think it's part of. And I'm not saying he was an injured, but like Paulie said, everybody goes through injuries. Everybody goes through little injuries during training camps, but it's not something where they can't fight or they can't throw the jab or they can't throw an uppercut. Maybe there is a little bit
Yeah,
of pain, but
because coach, if
fighting
it's
for
if
sure.
it's that kind of injury where you can't throw it, they don't fight. You know what I mean?
Then
That kind of
cancel the
injury you don't
fight, and you
fight.
have to
It's the
cancel
fight.
the fight
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
So what I'm thinking now is I don't know, the business is so big and a rematch would be so big. Do you think there's even a possibility where Canelo could, obviously is not going to reveal it, and Crawford would never do it either, but you want the rematch, there's so much out there, so much money out there, but in the rematch you have to fight as a right-handed. Do you think it's possible, Paulie?
I don't know. It's a good point, man. You know what? You know what? Nowadays, there's so many stipulations and rumors of these contracts and stipulations. I wonder. I'll tell you what they should do, though. I tell you, if Canelo does the rematch method, I'll tell you what they should do. Not they should do, but my personal opinion to make it better. Fight Eubank after the Ben fight. I think he'll mop the floor with Eubank, and then it'll give more self belief. You have the surgery, whatever you have to have. Beat Eubank, because now you don't have a title, so it's not like a waste of time to defend titles against Eubank. Beat Eubank, and that creates a mystique again. Like, oh, Canelo's back. He's destroyed somebody. He's looking good now. He's ready for Crawford, because you see the way his shoulder looked in this fight, the way his elbow looked in this fight. He looked great against Eubank. Again, theoretically speaking. And then you sign the Crawford rematch. Meantime, Crawford gets a little bit older, because remember, Crawford is older to begin with.
Exactly.
And then you make the rematch. I think if you're going to go this route, again, this is all hypothetical here.
Right.
But if you're going to go this route, I think maybe that's the way to go. Fight, get to surgery. Meantime, Eubank and Ben do the rematch. You expect Eubank to win again, and then fight Eubank, win that fight, which would be expected, and you could maybe even look great doing it, and that creates a selling point. Now we're ready. Now Crawford's gonna get it.
Right.
And then that's a selling point. Personally, I don't think it makes a difference. I think he loses easily again. But what I'm saying is, if I'm trying to build the product for the rematch, maybe I'm thinking that regard. I think that would be a good idea to do it that way.
And Robert, let's remember this. He still have a 2-fight on his contract with Turkey Al-Ashik.
Exactly.
I think
Two fights right there.
I think
Yeah.
Paulie's right. I think Paulie's right. Fight Eubank and then the rematch. And plus, it's going to be a year from now. It's going to be closer to Crawford turning 39. That's doesn't matter how well he performed in his last fight. A year could make a big difference. Crawford had the fight of his life, a performance of his life, and did so good and great that he might not be able to do that in a year from now. So it would be a perfect plan. I also agree. I'm not trying to get involved with their training camps or anything. But if they had a new member in the team, a new trainer, I think that would also sell with the fans,
Yeah.
with the boxing world. Well, hey, he's got so and so trainer now.
Mm,
They're doing so good. That might
yeah. New
sell a little
motivation.
bit more
New
too.
motivation. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
mentioned that before that his corner with Eddie Reynoso, he really sucks, man. He was really bad giving the instructions to Canelo.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just same face, nothing new. It doesn't get excited. I don't think. Listen, I think Reynoso and Canelo have had a terrific career together. But like Coach Garcia is saying, maybe add something different. Not. I wouldn't say remove Reynoso because I think it's more than a working relationship there. It's almost family, So I think removing something there would sort of leave a big scar. But certainly bringing a big face and a big name in the business for the corner, and that could, again, a conversation starter. It's a conversation point for the fans. New motivation, something different. Somebody maybe, hopefully, the chemistry with, and also if he's a little bit humble and would work together with this person, there could be new chemistry together, even for the trainers to game plan for the rematch. They can maybe start working together in the Eubank fight first. If again, hypothetically speaking, if they do the Eubank fight, I'm just creating the whole scenario myself. I don't know if this is gonna happen, but and you could test it out in that way. Yeah, I think there's different things you can do to make it marketable, even and create a conversation point, and possibly even be beneficial to Canelo. You never know. And even if it's not beneficial to Canelo, and it doesn't make a difference, and in the end he loses again to Crawford, you still beat any version of Canelo. I think beats Eubank anyway. So either way, you can get yourself there if you do it, if you use this road, and then the whole time, the conversation points for the fans, the conversation points for the critics, the media, journalists. Those are selling the fight.
Right.
New face in the corner, new motivation. Canelo, now he's healthy. All that helps to sell the fight. New and by the time you get there, and who knows? Maybe Crawford's a little older. Maybe Canelo wins a rematch. Then you could do 3 fights.
Robert, what do you think about Hamza Shiraz or David Benavides? David Benavides, that also he's fighting on the Riyadh season with
now you don't want to see the rematch then.
No, I don't want to see the rematch. I don't think it's going to be interesting.
You put him in with Shiraz and Benavides, that's it. He's done. Where's he going to go?
But I think
you can win the fight.
Those guys, I don't know.
Yeah, those guys I think they're just too big, too strong. I think they're in a totally different weight class. Even though they're fighting at Canelo and Crawford are both fighting at 68. They're a lot smaller than any 168 pounder light heavyweight. They're so much smaller that it might not even be a fight that interests me because they're just too big, too strong. I think at this point, Crawford, did accomplish that and did what he did. The only fighter he should fight at 168 is a rematch with Canelo. If not, move down to 160 and become a 6 division champion. Canelo is at 68, but those guys will be at this stage of Canelo's career. I think those guys are going to be too much for him.
But honestly, you want to see that rematch, Canelo versus Terence Crawford?
Me personally, no, I don't care.
I don't care either.
I don't care. Personally, if Canelo retires tomorrow, it doesn't make a difference to me. But I will say, there is a big aura about Canelo. He
Right.
does make boxing interesting. So if he would fight Eubank in a non-title fight, I'm down for it. I think he would really enjoy the atmosphere of the UK if he goes over to the UK. He could easily be in a stadium fight in the UK. So he could be, I don't want to say maybe the only guy, but maybe in the modern era, the only guy to do stadium fights in 2 continents. I mean, because Canelo's big enough to where I think he could do a stadium fight in Europe as well, in England at least,
Right.
in England as well, because you do Eubank, who's huge over there, and then Canelo is huge all over the world. I think you could do a stadium fight in the UK with Eubank, and then he's also done 2 different stadiums in the US. That's a guy. I don't know how many guys have done that, 2 stadium fights on 2 different continents. But that's a little feather in his hat. Listen, I don't think Canelo is a world championship material anymore, but he's still solid, fringe contender, even just full blown contender still. But I think his marketability can make him interesting to keep around, as long as the business doesn't get
Involved.
oversaturated, where you start handing him titles again and you start doing this and then you keep titles hostage again. I don't want to see that. But if Canelo wants to fight and he wants to do these interesting things, to me they're still interesting, because when Canelo's gone, I don't know if there's anybody who has that kind of platform, who has that kind of aura about them anymore in boxing, and that's kind of scary too. You know, before, like I said, we had Mayweather, we had De La Hoya, we had Tyson, we had Ray Leonard, we had these kind of Chavez. Who do you have now that has that kind of aura that you stick their name out there and then they can fill up an arena like this, or even a stadium eventually like this? You know,
Right.
You had in this generation, you had Canelo and you had Anthony Joshua. In England, okay, you made Ben and Eubank, but really they're not that special boxing wise. It's just the UK has an amazing boxing atmosphere, but you really don't have. You may not have somebody like this again. Not to say Canelo's one of a kind, but people like this were one of a kind, or one of a few at least.
Right.
Like at every generation, they're so huge, they fill up seats, arenas, stadiums, whatever. We've had them in every generation, one or two. I kind of shake to think we don't have any after this generation, or at least not at that level, you know? And so if Canelo hangs around and does it that way without, again, involving the business where you start getting free titles and stuff for no reason, I wouldn't mind it. It's sort of like a little bit of a higher level of Chavez's retirement run when he had a retirement run after he lost to De La Hoya. It was kind of cool, you know, until he lost to Wiley. But of course, you know, Canelo can mix and match it. I think he's still a higher level than that, and he can beat the Eubanks of the world.
But Robert, still having 2 fights on his contract with Turki Al-Sheikh, who would you like to see Canelo fight in his comeback?
Well, the thing is that we don't know, you know, about the contract. Maybe Canelo has to fight who Turkey says he has to fight. I don't know. I really don't know how that goes. But I think Paulie's plan is, I like that. I would like to see that him fight, you know, Eubank, Conor Benn, if he's able to beat him, which, you know, maybe not. But, you know, have that fight in the UK, it would be huge. It's a stadium fight, and then do the rematch just because, you know, you want to at least get that out of your system. You know, try one more time. Maybe the elbow was the big problem, if that's the way they want to think. Those are the 2 fights I would probably go after. There's no other fights out there. Who else at 60 or
Definitely.
you know,
Robert,
those are the only 2 fights.
I'm thinking myself, okay, this is my final plan.
Yes.
Eubank, because I expected he beats Ben, otherwise Ben. Crawford rematch. If you win, you do the 3rd fight. If you lose, you do Jake Paul and retire.
Exactly.
Or you still do the same thing. Eubank or Ben, Crawford and win. Do the 3rd fight with Crawford, win or lose. Then you do 3 fights with Crawford, and then you still have Jake Paul at the end. So you either way, you top it off. You end it with a Jake Paul fight, but in the meantime, you may have 2 more fights with Crawford or 1 more fight with Crawford, depending on if you win the next one. But you started out with a Eubank fight, because I think Eubank beats Ben. But if it's not Eubank, it's Ben. Either way, that's my plan. I
or
think
he's going to make a lot of money.
yeah, and what I'm saying is it keeps a profile, it keeps active, it keeps again, I use that word aura. We still keep our guy has that boxing aura around him, because, like I said, we've always had them in every generation, but I fear that after Canelo, maybe we don't have that anymore. So maybe we can make it kind of cool if we do it in a certain way where we don't use him up too much, but at the same time, still creates big events that we can enjoy.
Definitely, if it's Canelo versus Eubank in London or in England, it would be a
or
huge
any
fight.
stadium. I mean, whatever you do, London, you do Manchester, whatever you want to do. I mean, the UK is out of this world. I think Canelo would love that experience. I really do.
Let me look.
Yes,
Paulie,
Robert.
I think that, you know, the 2-3 fights that we're talking about, you know, the rematch, he wins, if they do the 3rd fight. So we're talking about maybe 3 fights. If and then Jake Paul. By then, do you agree? Because I feel it will be a good fight, actually. Because Paul is, you know, Jake Paul is big, strong, and he's boxing. He's training.
I don't know,
you know, we call him a YouTuber.
Robert,
we have to see how he's going to look against
Robert,
Tank Davis.
I said something.
Canelo slowed down a lot.
Canelo
has slowed down a lot.
But Canelo,
I see it maybe being actually a good fight.
No. Canelo still counterpunches. Jake Paul still has a novice boxing style. I noticed it last fight. It was really more out there, because it was. I was noticing it with Chavez, who was, you know, wasn't very active, and you didn't have to move out of the pocket so much because it was a guy who wasn't that active. But anytime Chavez even attempted to move his hands, Jake Paul would fly out of the pocket. So Jake Paul fights in a style that, Robert, I don't know if you listen to my commentating at times. I call it your turn, my turn. Your turn, my turn means guys that only punch when they go or you go. And when you go, they're not punching. They're never counter-punching. They're never counter-punching at all. So either you go or they go, but they don't know how to punch in between you. If you don't learn to punch in between, you remain a novice kind of fighter, you know?
Correct.
Jake never punches when you're punching. Whenever you're punching, he flies out completely, out of the pocket completely. He never holds his ground because you need a little bit of balls to hold your ground and slip and counter or catch even and counter. So it takes a bit of a different psychology. It takes a little bit of an elevation to your boxing to be able to have that control. Because you also, when you do that, you have to decide when it's time to stay and do that. And sometimes it's not time to stay and do that. Sometimes you do leave the pocket. There's a decision you have to make there.
That's a great point.
So Jake doesn't do that at all. He hasn't even reached that level of boxing. No, there's no way a your turn, my turn guy who's novice at that beats any version of Canelo. I don't think it's a good fight. I don't think anything. But hey, man, you know.
Yeah, but knowing Canelo, everything's for the money. Eh?
No, I'm not even knocking the fight because at the end of it, it's at the end of the career, fine. I'm actually okay with that. You know, like there's no belts in the line. You know that he's got the belts are gone, whatever. But I'm just contradicting Coach Garcia. I don't think it's a good fight, but I'd still watch it. Like, you know, I mean, at that point, it's a retired Canelo. He's on his way out. You know, let him go do that. You know, it's fine. I don't have a problem as long as you're not keeping belts hostage. That's it. That's my final statement.
We have to watch it. Yeah, we have to watch it because it's our job.
Yeah.
Paulie, thank you very much, okay?
Thanks, guys.
Robert, thank you very much, my friend.
Gracias.
Thank you, amigos. This is a Boxing Scene Today. I'm Ricardo Celis. Thank you. Have a great day.